Doris Day's only grandson says he was kept from seeing the Hollywood legend for the last 14 years of her life.
Her lone grandchild, Ryan Melcher, hadn't laid eyes on his grandmother in over a decade. Like everyone else, he learnt about Doris Day's death at the age of 97 on Facebook. The singer of Secret Love had her own secrets, including a manager who isolated her family, a $22 million deceit, and a life lived in secrecy in Carmel. America adored Ryan's grandma, but he never got to know her well. Now Ryan speaks up about her. Doris Marianne Koff came into this world in Cincinnati, Ohio on April 3, 1922. Her given name is Doris Day. William, who taught music, and Alma, who stayed at home to raise their daughter, were members of a working-class community. Richard, one of Doris's older brothers, tragically passed away before she was even born. Her resolute character was molded by this tragedy. Her parents' divorce was upsetting and unusual for a youngster of that age. Despite the hardships they had as a family during the Great Depression, Doris's mother was the primary caregiver for her. The independent attitude that Doris exhibited even as a little girl was obvious. She earned free dancing lessons when she won a contest at the tender age of 12 by standing on her hands for more than 3 hours. The resolve that would characterize her whole life was on display here. Doris's life took a tragic turn when she was 14 years old, despite her passion of dancing and ambition to be a professional dancer. An awful vehicle accident happened right before she was to go to Hollywood, where her life may have taken a dramatic turn. The vehicle she was riding in was struck by a train, shattering her leg. The severity of the condition led physicians to consider amputation as a possible option. Doris endured many invasive surgery and was unable to walk for more than a year. She found solace in singing throughout this difficult period. While doing so, she sang along with radio broadcasts of Ella Fitzgerald, one of her favorite artists. After her mother saw her vocal potential, she enrolled her in a singing class with Grace Rain. Among Grace's students, Doris stood out as the most gifted. Dorita began her professional singing career at the tender age of 15. She started off working for $5 per night at a little Chinese restaurant. It was a beginning, though it was little. She attracted the ear of Barney Rapp, the band leader, one night while she sang at a neighborhood nightclub. After a lengthy search, he finally found the female vocalist he was seeking for when he heard Doris. The catch was that Doris couldn't work in establishments serving alcohol because she was too young. To get around this, she pretended to be 18 years old. Not wanting to lose the opportunity to perform, she was scared that others would find out. Doris decided to alter her name in 1939 when she was 17 years old. Her real name is Kappelhoff, but Barney Rapp believed it was too lengthy and difficult to pronounce to be a stage name. Upon listening to Doris perform day after day, he proposed the moniker Doris Day. It sounded too ostentatious to Doris at first, so she didn't approve. Nevertheless, she gradually acclimated to the moniker, and it remained. Doris Day's meteoric rise to Hollywood stardom was completely unexpected. March 15, 1940, at the tender age of 18, Doris Day became an indelible part of Les Brown's band. That nearly didn't materialize, though. Doris quaked with fear and felt nauseous backstage before her audition. Even Les Brown had to step in and bolster her spirits by bringing up the talent he'd heard about on the radio. Along with his encouragement, Doris took the stage and surprised the band with her rendition of Embraceable You. As a result, she was hired. But she had a tough time during her time with the group. Doris learned of her brother Paul's death in an automobile accident on Valentine's Day, 1941, while traveling with the group. Despite her overwhelming sadness, she made the conscious decision to perform that night. The crowd was moved to tears by her really moving singing. She will be remembered for her exceptional talent of expressing herself via music. In 1945, the band's most memorable performance was of Sentimental Journey. Les first disapproved of the song, calling it too old-fashioned. But Doris was so committed to the piece that she threatened to leave the band if they didn't record it. At last he caved and the song shot to fame. A fun tidbit about the song is that Doris was sick with a cold when she recorded it, which gave her voice that distinctive, husky, emotive quality. The song became the theme song for troops returning home from World War II and sold over 1 million copies in its first year. Doris chose to go it alone in the music industry in 1947. Beginnings were challenging. Much pressure was placed on her when she inked a deal with Columbia Records on September 1st. She received a 7-year, $1 million contract, making her one of the first female performers to do so. Things weren't easy to begin with, even with this great chance. The songs chosen for her at her first recording session were dull and old-fashioned, she thought. No, Doris was not going to sing them. The studio ultimately let her pick her own tracks after she argued with them. An enormous hit single, It's Magic, was the result of her choice to record it. It was nominated for an Oscar and sold over 2 million copies. That Doris only needed one take to record It's Magic just added to its uniqueness. The entire studio was astounded. Columbia Records was overwhelmed by the demand for the song due to its immense popularity. In order to mass-produce Doris's smash, they had to halt production of all other recordings. Unexpected twists and turns abound in Doris Day's secret love narrative. The song was composed for her 1953 film Calamity Jane, but she had strong disapproval of it. She declined to sing it because she felt the lyrics were overly sentimental. That made things difficult for the filmmakers. David Butler, the director, chose to pay her a late-night visit. He pleaded with her to give the song a go, bringing a bottle of champagne and a pianist. She gave her consent after much persuasion. It was a rocky day on the day of recording as well. Marty Melcher and Doris had a heated argument last night, and Doris arrived at the studio distraught and in tears. Regardless, she was adamant about getting the song recorded. She poured her heart and everything into her performance, singing it in a single take. The studio audience was taken aback. Even the sound engineer was unable to speak as the symphony members sobbed. Due to the recording's profound impact, Columbia Records opted to release it in its original unaltered form. The song became an instant sensation upon its debut. Secret Love sold over 4 million copies globally and remained at the top of the Billboard charts for 19 weeks. In fact, it was the first time an actor had ever sang an Oscar-winning song, Doris, because it was the best original song. Doris was still anxious about playing it live despite her celebrity. On account of her severe stage fear, she declined to perform it during the Oscars. Many in the entertainment industry were offended by this and began to falsely accuse her of being difficult to deal with. Later in life, Secret Love took on a different significance. Its lyrics about secret love resonated with the LGBTQ+ community of the 60s and 70s, who viewed it as a rallying cry for their fights. Doris was profoundly affected when she learned about this at a later date. Notably, for an actress of her day, she publicly backed the cause. A twist of destiny set the stage for Doris Day's Hollywood career. Jewel Stein and Sammy Cahn, two well-known songwriters, overheard her perform one night at a party. They were so taken with her that she give acting a go. Time was of the essence. Because she was expecting a child, main actress Betty Hutton left Romance on the High Seas, 1948. Doris, a 25-year-old who had never performed before, battled her nerves and gave it a go. It really floored filmmaker Michael Curtis. He cast her in the role and gushed about her, calling her the most perfect girl he'd ever seen. She became famous because to her role in the film. It was as if Doris had been acting for years, despite the fact that she was just starting out. Her phenomenal Hollywood career began with a long-term deal with Warner Brothers, which she received as a result of the film's popularity. Doris soared to musical stardom in the 1950s. A departure from her typical lovely and innocent characters, she portrayed a wild and daring frontierswoman in one of her most renowned films, Calamity Jane, 1953. Doing risky stunts like jumping onto a moving stagecoach, Doris gave it her all for the part. She suffered an injury, shattering a rib, but her perseverance was rewarded. Still a hit years after its release, the film grossed more than $3.7 million. A delightful musical about employees in a pajama factory, The Pajama Game, 1957, was another smash hit. The majority of the original cast members, with the exception of Doris, returned for the film adaptation of the Broadway musical. Both the movie and her infectious rendition of the song Hey There contributed to its success. The film's $5 million in box office earnings solidified Doris's status as a top performer at that era. In 1955, Doris Day launched a new chapter in her career with the release of Love Me or Leave Me. Her previous work had been upbeat musicals, but this film was a radical departure. Ruth Etting, a singer who dealt with a violent management and crime, was played by her. A darker and more poignant aspect of Doris's skill shone through in the novel. In response to her stellar performance, Ruth Etting commented, "I never knew I was that good." The film grossed more than $4 million and received positive reviews. Her co-star James Cagney was among many who felt she deserved an Oscar nomination. It was difficult to make the film since they had to alter some violent sequences because they violated the regulations of the period. The film did prove, however, that Doris Day was capable of more than just singing and smiling. It also demonstrated that she could ace dramatic parts. Doris Day went on to become one of Hollywood's top performers after this. She ruled the box office in the 50s and 60s. With Shirley Temple as her only predecessor, she held the title of most popular American cinema star from 1960 until 1964. As her debut film co-starring Rock Hudson, Pillow Talk, 1959, was a smashing success. The production cost was $3 million, yet it made more than $18 million. She went on to work with Hudson in two more films, Lover Come Back, 1961, and Send Me No Flowers, 1964, thanks to their incredible connection. Among the three, Pillow Talk garnered Doris her lone Best Actress Oscar nomination. They were all massive successes. Over $200 million was the gross from Doris Day's films. She had already established herself as Hollywood's most bankable actress by 1965. With a salary of $750,000 each picture plus a cut of the earnings, she was also among the highest-paid actors. Her style and music were equally as beloved by the public as her films. In America, she was truly legendary. It wasn't always a picnic for Day being America's sweetheart. She said afterwards that maintaining that flawless look was challenging, but her impact on the film, music, and cultural industries was substantial. Doris Day's life, on and off film, was full of unexpected twists and turns. The Doris Day Show, her unique comedy, ran from 1968 until 1973. Season after season, the show's plot, location, and characters evolved from its original California ranch setting, which served as a backdrop for a family comedy. It seemed like every year the spectacle took on a different form. This uniqueness came from the fact that fans were never sure what to anticipate, which added to the excitement. These alterations were reflective of the era's fast-paced cultural transformation in the 60s and 70s. Doris chose to stop acting once the program finished so she could devote herself to her true passion: assisting animals. She had a burning desire since she was a little girl. Tragically, her dog Tiny perished in an accident, and the pain of that loss compelled her to devote her life to animal welfare. Doris was an animal lover even when she was working. She was appalled to see the animals treated so badly on the set of The Man Who Knew Too Much in Morocco. She would not continue working until the animals were taken care of. She demonstrated her concern and influence by taking the necessary steps to establish a feeding station for the neighborhood animals. The Doris Day Animal Foundation evolved from the Doris Day Pet Foundation, which Doris established in 1978. Local animal rescues were its primary emphasis at the outset. Doris even had a large number of pets that she cared for at home. As it expanded, the organization took on more significant issues, such as combating animal overpopulation. To raise awareness about the need of spaying and neutering dogs, Doris established World Spay Day in 1995. Millions of animals benefited as the news traveled to more than 70 nations. Using her celebrity to advocate for animal rights, Doris also sought to amend legislation that would have protected animals. In 2011, Doris shocked everyone with a new album called My Heart. Despite leaving Hollywood, the 89-year-old released songs recorded in the 1980s, including many composed by her late son, Terry Melcher. Emotions ran high on the record, which was deeply personal. When Terry and Doris sang Happy Endings, it was a real treat. To everyone's delight, the record became a smashing success. With its 9th-place finish on the UK Albums Chart, Doris became the oldest artist to ever have a top 10 album with new material. For the United States, it was her first time back on the Billboard charts in over half a century. Doris continued to avoid the limelight even after the record became a hit. Working for the welfare of animals was her main pastime. On her 97th birthday in 2019, she made her final public appearance. She urged her supporters to continue supporting animals through her charity and thanked them for their support. Marrying trombonist Al Jordan, who was 23 years old, at the tender age of 17, was a tough turning point in Doris Day's life. Day was adamant about the marriage despite her mother's warnings. And her mother's worst nightmares did come true. As soon as they were married in April 1941, the abuse began the day after they were officially married. Day thanked a fellow musician for a present by pecking him on the cheek, which Jordan saw. In his enraged state, he brutally beat her after dragging her from the theater and across New York City streets to their hotel room. There was more bloodshed. Constantly accusing Day of infidelity, Jordan displayed domineering and jealous tendencies. As soon as he laid eyes on her magazine cover, he began publicly slapping her and calling her horrible insults. Day becoming pregnant made matters worse. She was on the verge of miscarriage because Jordan assaulted her so severely after she refused to undergo an illegal abortion. When she was 8 months along in her pregnancy, the worst part happened. In preparation for murdering Day and their unborn child as well as himself, Jordan stashed a firearm in his vehicle and took her to a remote location. Day rescued him and spared him catastrophe with her lightning reflexes, but the fear would never leave her. Ever since that day, the thought of sitting in the front seat of a car filled her with fear. Day hoped that Jordan would change with the birth of her son Terry in February 1942. Thus, she attempted to keep the marriage together. However, she realized she had to get out of there when he began abusing their child. Divorcing her husband wasn't an easy decision, but she mustered the strength to do it. Day would unfortunately find herself in relationships with mentally disturbed men on more occasions after this. It seems like a new beginning when she wed musician George Weidler for the second time. Their chemistry was palpable the moment they crossed paths as bandmates. They were married in 1946 when Day, a young single mother, was captivated by his charisma. They relocated to Hollywood after getting married in the hopes of greater possibilities. Things looked okay at first, but then they began to fall apart. Doris proposed that Weidler bring her mother and son to live with them, but Weidler was not prepared to be a stepfather and made his disapproval clear. As Day's singing career took off, he too had a hard time keeping up with her rising stardom. He grew distant and uneasy. After they were married for only 8 months, he broke the news that he wanted a divorce, which was a devastating blow. The rationale behind it? She was becoming famous, and Day was mortified that he would be referred to as Mr. Doris Day. Despite her best intentions, this marriage did not deliver the stability and happiness she had hoped for. Looking for solace and space to recover, she and her son went back to Cincinnati when the divorce was finalized in 1949. She believed she had finally found happiness when she wed Martin Melcher in 1951. On the contrary, he surreptitiously damaged her for 17 years after becoming her manager. Her money was taken by Melcher and his business partner, Jerome Rosenthal, who then squandered it on questionable businesses. Melcher had Doris's full confidence, thus she never once questioned his actions. A horrible reality was revealed to Doris upon Melcher's unexpected death in 1968. Her whole inheritance, which was worth $150 million today, was gone. She had a further $500,000 in debt. However, it was not all. Melcher had enrolled her in a CBS TV show in secret, without her knowledge or consent. Former Hollywood A-lister Doris was now penniless and pushed into a career in television she had no desire to. In order to reclaim her property, Doris took Rosenthal to court. She was awarded a $22 million compensation in 1974, but due to insurance company negotiations, she ended up receiving only a fraction of that amount. In retrospect, her son admitted that she received far less than initially anticipated. Devastating was this treachery. Melcher deceived Doris for over 20 years, despite her unwavering confidence in him. She was so devastated that she decided to withdraw from the limelight. Among Melcher's treachery's most painful aspects was the TV show he had enrolled her in. After her final film in 1968, Doris had intended to retire, but she was now left with no other option. She was obligated to perform on The Doris Day Show, in order to settle the obligations left by Melcher. A few weeks before production began, she was shocked to hear about the show. The fact that CBS's $500,000 advance had already been squandered was much worse. Doris had other problems besides her financial situation. Anxiety and despair plagued her for the most of her life. Fear and panic episodes plagued her even while her celebrity was at its peak. For the 1952 film I'll See You in My Dreams, she suffered a nervous breakdown. Because her symptoms were so severe, she feared she was about to die of heart disease. Doris drank herself into insanity rather than seek professional therapy for her emotional issues. Her mental state had deteriorated to a critical point by the early 1950s. She shied away from media appearances and declined interviews. She had an emotional sequence on set of 1954's Young at Heart that caused her to cry. Frank Sinatra, her co-star, had to console her. Doris went on to say that she felt like she was about to have a breakdown. It is remarkable that Doris waited until 1971 at over 50 years old to seek therapy during this period. She sought treatment for her persistent sadness and anxiety for 4 years. As a result, she was able to find some calm, she added. Terry Melcher was born to Doris Day on February 8, 1942, and she had just one kid. She brought up Terry all by herself for a while. She wed Martin Melcher in 1951. Terry wasn't always happy at home even after Martin adopted him and gave him his surname. Because of Martin's frequent harshness and control, Terry was left to fend for himself. Terry began to get recognition in the music industry as he entered his twilight years. He had worked his way up to producer in the 1960s and was employed by Columbia Records. Significant singles for the Byrds, including as Mr. Tambourine Man and Turn, 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 Ah, were among his contributions. In addition, he produced many singles for Paul Revere and the Raiders. That was just the beginning of Terry's talent. In 1988, he produced the Beach Boys' Kokomo, their first #1 single in 22 years, marking his subsequent collaboration with the band. However, Terry's life extended beyond the realm of music. Something terrible occurred in 1968. Terry and his girlfriend Candice Bergen were residing in a mansion in Los Angeles. In the aftermath, this Cello Drive house became notorious as the location of the Sharon Tate murders committed by the cult of Charles Manson. Terry and Manson met via Dennis Wilson, the drummer for the Beach Boys, who they shared a mutual connection with. Though Manson begged Terry to help him land a record contract, Terry declined. The denial infuriated Manson. Terry vacated the residence a few months down the road. Sharon Tate and her companions were assassinated by members of the Manson cult shortly thereafter. While some speculate that Terry was the intended victim, no one has ever confirmed this. The tragic tale was told by Ryan Melcher, the sole grandchild of Doris Day. He broke the news on Facebook the day following his grandmother's death, May 13, 2019, after being distant from her for 14 years. The fact that, like millions of her admirers, he learned of her death via social media does not make matters any better. The disclosure revealed the extent to which their familial bonds had been severed, which was a tragic and upsetting event. After Doris Day's sole child, Terry Melcher, passed away at 62 years old from melanoma in 2004, problems started to arise. Doris promptly contacted Ryan and extended an invitation to supper. Since they had grown apart following Ryan's parents' 1997 divorce, this looked like a great opportunity to get back together. Unfortunately, not everything worked out. The supper was interrupted by Bob Bashara, Doris's new business manager. At the Cypress Inn, a Carmel, California motel that Doris co-owned, he summoned Ryan to a meeting. Bashara reportedly questioned Ryan, "Why do you want to see Doris?" Ryan was taken aback and responded, "She's my grandmother." However, rather than drawing them closer, Bashara asserted that he would not be permitted to see Doris. Finally, he laid the responsibility for the split at the feet of Ryan's parents. It was at that point that the agonizing separation began, which would continue until Doris passed away. Ryan came to terms with the fact that he should have done more to reconnect later on. According to him, it was extremely difficult since Bashara had installed gates and guards around Doris's house. Still, he regretted not making more of an effort. After a while, Ryan picked himself up and went on to become a real estate agent in Carmel. At the same time, he asserts that Bashara replaced Doris's long-serving board members with members of his own family and made other changes to Doris's Animal Welfare Foundation. When Doris's publicist Charlie Cullen Walters addressed Melcher's accusations, the narrative took a different direction. According to Walters, who has been working with Doris since 2011, several attempts were made to re-establish contact with Ryan. In 2014, there was an attempt to celebrate Doris's 90th birthday, a time when the whole family might have celebrated together. Walters claims, however, that Ryan remained silent. The reason for this separation could not have been entirely Doris's fault, Walters said. He brought up an intriguing point. Ryan himself once removed a note from his website requesting that fans not contact him with issues pertaining to Hollywood or celebrities. This further complicated the matter. While Ryan first tried to shun the limelight that came with his grandmother's celebrity, he eventually admitted that he missed having a relationship with her. If you believe Walters, the narrative was more about innocent misunderstandings than any overt acts of hostility. Doris ultimately decided to retire from public life in her latter years. She went into seclusion following the 1968 death of her third husband, Martin Melcher. Doris had virtually disappeared from public view by the 1990s. One of her greatest loves was tending to the animals that resided on her 11-acre ranch outside Carmel, California. It was said that she could take care of up to 30 dogs simultaneously, each with its own room. Her ranch served as a tranquil refuge from the chaos of her life, and she lived for them. Doris disliked public gatherings and traveling, so she declined several awards, including the Kennedy Center Awards, and spent much of her time at home. In 1989, she made her final public appearance at the Golden Globes, and in 1994, she gave her last television interview. The residents of Carmel remembered her as the kind woman who took in strays and had a life of modest means. In her bedroom, she kept a washing machine and even used paper plates for her meals. She built a whole room around her pet's kitchen. Their love ran so deep in her heart. Doris Melcher's seclusion deepened following the 2004 death of her son, Terry. Bob Bashara, who was her business manager, began to take charge of most of her responsibilities. Because of this, Ryan felt distant from his grandma, which exacerbated their relationship. It provided more context for the tale of Doris's later life, when issues of privacy and family conflict intertwined.